Okay, so today I wanted to go over the PPP round two. And to do that, I thought it might be helpful to use a very good website that I'm very familiar with, and a lot of other accountants are probably pretty familiar with, and maybe some of you who are employers are pretty familiar with, and that's Gusto. Gusto does payroll processing. They do everything that you need to do in terms of payroll. So we file your 941s, file your 940s, file your W-2s, etc. A lot of that stuff's here on Gusto. We take our clients, if we were getting with clients to get them on payroll, we will work with Gusto to onboard them, and usually that means sometimes retrieving withholding ID numbers or unemployment numbers and things of that nature. But we use Gusto a lot around here, and Gusto has a lot of very, very good information about the PPP round two. That's because they're a payroll provider, right? Obviously, with the PPP loans, most of that's going to go through a specific bank that you choose and that you work with. And so part of this is finding a little bit of relevant information, making sure that you're ready in order to fulfill an application. And we'll go through what the application looks like and kind of how you would go through filling that out. And then I'm also just going to go into who qualifies for the second round of PPP. So if you've already received a round of PPP, the second round has a couple of unique limitations to it, right? It wasn't just like the everybody gets to apply, everybody gets free money kind of PPP round. This is a second round where its focus is on people who actually did lose money and actually did have gross receipts lost for a specific period in time. And that is what we would be applying for, right? There's a couple of eligibility requirements, and we'll go through that in detail here as we kind of go through what Gusto has set up for us. I think this is a great asset to go through and just kind of make sure that you may or may not be eligible for the second round of PPP. So the first thing is there's an SBA application form in both hands here for both the first and second draw borrowers. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail here. I'm just going to pull it up so that I have it going. And then we'll look through that in a little bit more detail a little bit later on here. So let's see here. First of all, some of the loan limitations have been expanded. This is a big one. Forgiveness for loans under 150,000 have a new simplified one-page application for forgiveness and for the second draw, right? So pretty awesome stuff. And eligible expenses for forgiveness has been expanded. So it's not just that 8-week either too. You can choose 8 and 24 weeks, right? So 24 weeks gives you enough time to get rid of 2.5 months worth of payroll. Before it was only 8 weeks, right? They expanded that just recently to include that extra half a month. So, because I mean, if you were just trying to cover your payroll expenses or your personal payroll expenses, if you were a self-employed business owner, you would basically kind of divide that and pay yourself over that entire time period by certain percentages or certain payrolls. And make sure that you met those eligibility requirements. And now they've relaxed those a little bit, so you can easily make those, right, and show what that forgiveness was. So most of the payroll expenses, if you're self-employed, right, one of the payroll expenses was draws, right, and a lot of people took draws going forward here. So a lot of the times we would take your net self-employment income, divide that by 12 to get you a monthly, and multiply that times 2.5, and that would be your PPP loan amount, right? And we just could not do all of that within that 2-month time period and actually call that payroll, right? Because it had to be that average monthly payroll. So luckily they added those extra weeks, so now it's not as difficult to get there. One of the big things here too, and I was telling clients back in December, that PPP loan, at the time the IRS had recognized the PPP loan as the if you look back at the CARES Act, the original CARES Act, they said specifically, this PPP loan is not going to be considered income, right? Then the IRS came in and said, well, if it's not considered income, we also shouldn't be considering the deductions that are located with this income. And they have backing for this too, right? I mean, life insurance is one of those things where, yeah, well, we didn't consider that to be a deduction, so we don't consider it to be income when it actually is received. And when you have that record, and you look at that record, it's funny because the legislation specifically said this isn't going to be treated as income, but if we can't treat the deductions as deductions, then it's income. Then it's considered income, basically. We're adding back income to a lot of people's tax returns. So back in December, when the IRS was taking this stance, I told people more likely than not, this isn't going to be something that they end up doing, right? Because it could have taken an executive order, any kind of real action needed to be that could be taken to eliminate that would have been taken and it would have been gone, right? Um, and so they slipped it into the second round of stimulus. And so now we don't have to worry about them including that as actual income now. So just don't worry about it. Any of the PPP loan proceeds that you have, it is not considered income or taxable income. Okay. And you get to count all your deductions. So good stuff. All right. So eligibility, the first draw, basically you just had to have a beating heart and a business, be under 500 full-time employees, and you could have gotten a PPP loan, right? The difference there is like, did you pay yourself a salary? So we actually had a bunch of people who are S corp owners who paid themselves a low to no salary or something like that for an initial year or something like that. And because they did, they weren't eligible for the PPP loan because the PPP loan would have been based on their wages for that specific time period, right? If you were self-employed, if you had an LLC and you were self-employed, you were also limited to actually having business income, right? Self-employment income in 2019 in order to be able to take a PPP loan, right? So that was one of the big disadvantages here for a lot of people. So a lot of people ended up going with either an EIDL loan, which has had different circumstances, or unemployment, right? So the second draw one, the big thing here is to note that it's less than 300 full-time employees. I know the majority of the people who are watching this right now do not have 300 employees, probably have like maybe max 10, max 20 employees, right? So if you're watching this, you have like under 20 employees, you definitely fit this criteria here for the second round PPP. The other big thing here is that you're able to demonstrate a revenue reduction of at least 25% in the first, second, or third quarter of 2020, right? So all you have to do is literally, I'll just show you kind of what this looks like. So you want to take your 2019 revenue, your 2020 revenue. I want to do Q1, Q2, Q3. And if you're in QuickBooks, it's really easy to kind of pull this up. You just got to set it for, 1/1/2019 to 3/31/2019. And you're going to see that's the first quarter, right? And you're just going to look at your gross receipts. And that's your first quarter revenue, right? And you want to make sure that you set it to cash. If you're in QuickBooks, set it to cash. All right, so Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, right? And you just want to go, okay, so I made $500,000 last quarter in Q1 of 2019, right? And let's say we made 400,000 Q2, Q1 2020. So our reduction is no. Huh. All right, so your reduction is 20%, right? So we just do 1 minus this. There's other ways to do this more simply, but that's our percentage, right? So 20%, we didn't make it with 400,000, right? So let's just say we had 300,000, right? Now all of a sudden our percentage goes up and now we're at 40%. We know that we dipped underneath that 25% threshold in terms of gross receipts. Let's just go right here. And so you'll just want to make sure that that one of these quarters here that you're doing this little calculation for, one of these quarters here needs to be 25% reduction, right? If we have 25% reduction, we qualify for PPP round 2. The other thing to keep in mind too is there was a limitation of the type of businesses, like 1 million gross receipts or so. So if you had, if you're a recruiter, like the majority of you are here, the, if you were a recruiter and you had gross receipts of under $30 million, you would have qualified for whatever that restriction limitation is that you might see or bump into. Also, you can't be one of these types of businesses. You'd want to look into some of what they're really going into. If you do have some of these, you can look a little deeper and make sure that they're really trying to restrict you specifically. Because sometimes you may be eligible for this when these specific options are highlighted, right? You may be eligible still. All right, that's just the amount that have been set out. Yeah, PPP loans, 1%, right? When do you get money that's 1%? You could take, like, literally, you could take this PPP loan out and put it in the stock market. Um, I would suggest mutual funds. We'll talk about what that looks like later. But you can put it in the stock market, make like a 6% or higher return on it annually, right? And you're going to be a lot better off. So, I mean, this is like free money, free interest, like interest, low interest money. So if you do qualify for it, take it, and then you're probably going to qualify for the forgiveness. So it's probably just free, right? So, I mean, if you're in that situation, you had that reduction, take your money. It's free, right? You're more likely going to be able to get that all forgiven pretty quickly. Yeah, the maturity is over 5 years. So if you did have to pay any of it back, it's 5 years, right? But the intention here, just so you understand, is not that you're actually going to have a loan here. The intention is that you're going to get it all forgiven, and it's basically just free government money, right? To help you with your business and help you make payroll. If that's for yourself, then that's for yourself, right? I mean, COVID-19 hasn't been pretty for all of us, right? So this is a way, especially for recruiters. I mean, it has been really hard, especially the first part of the year, towards the latter part of the year as well. You know, it's been really hard to make a lot of those placements that you may have been used to making, and that is mostly because of COVID, right? I mean, there was a lot of job losses a while ago, and hopefully we're seeing it. I know I'm seeing it from a lot of my clients. There's a lot of people coming back, a lot of people rehiring. So we're seeing that quite a bit recently. All right, there's a couple of limitations here. Just kind of keep aware of that. And the cover period is 24 weeks. This is what you must spend the loan on, and part of that needs to be payroll costs. If you're self-employed, that's you. It's just part of it must be spent on it, right? So if you just take the PPP loan, you're self-employed, it's just you, just take it all, you're good to go, right? You don't have to spend it on anything else. You can put it all there, right? Only a portion of it may be used for some of these other things, right? Rent, utilities, etc. All right, so there's a loan forgiveness application, super easy to do for the most part, especially the 33508 EZ for a lot of people where there's um, not that much to forgive. You can qualify for the easier ones, right? So any PPP less than $50,000, do this one, right? Super easy. Um, and then there's a couple other easy forms, right? The big thing is, I know, especially a lot of people at the very beginning of the first round of PPP was just having a hard time finding banks. I think that there is a huge list of banks that are allowing PPP loans right now up here. Okay. So they should be able to give you a list of lenders here. So if you're having any difficulty trying to find a place to give you PPP loans, you're going to find it over here. Okay. So this is, once again, this is a great resource website. They've always done pretty well at providing extra resources for people. Right. This is just saying that that in terms of like the taxes, we don't have to include that in income anymore. Okay, here is the application. So let's just take a look at it real quick. Okay. So this is the second draw. And if we're going through all this, you know, you just got to put your name, your business, all your business information in here. Your average monthly payroll, if you're self-employed, it's going to be your net, your basically your net Schedule C from 2019. So I'm going to pull up in your Schedule C from 2019, which looks a little bit like this, and I'll show you here. Schedule C. So this is your net profit and loss. Basically, your self-employment income is going to be right here on line 31. So you want to take line 31 and you want to divide that by 12, and then that's going to be your average monthly payroll that you're going to have right here, right? Then you're going to multiply it times 2.5, right? And there is some people here that can multiply times 2.5, but almost everybody here, especially all recruiters, are going to be multiplying that times 2.5. So let's say we made, for instance, let's say we made $50,000. Right, divided by 12, okay, 4,166 times 2.5. That's your loan, right? $10,416, okay? And that's the loan that you can put in there. One thing to keep in mind here, that your average monthly payroll, there's a top limit to this, right? So the maximum compensation that somebody could be allowed for the PPP is 100,000, right? So we take 100,000 divided by 12 times 2.5. Okay, so $20,833 per person. That's the maximum amount that you can get per person, right? So if you got one person, self-employed, you made 150,000, 180,000 in 2019. This is the maximum loan amount that you can have. List that, purpose of loan, then check whatever boxes here. You know, I mean, if you just do payroll costs, if you're self-employed, you just do payroll costs, you should be covered, right? If you have other costs here, you're going to put that in as well. If you did take it one before, you have to put the loan number in there. Here we go. So this is, like I said, this is the spreadsheet, right? So we made our little spreadsheet, whatever that spreadsheet was with the gross receipts on it. We have our gross receipts. We got Q1, gross receipt Q1, Q2, gross receipt 300,000. We qualify. So we want to put, you know, Q1, and then we want to put 500,000, and then we want to put 300,000, right? So that gives us our 25%. That's it. That's all you got to do there. And then just if you are an owner, if you've got partners there, you want to list all your personal information. All right. And then you just want to go through these questions here. If these are, you know, most of this is just disqualifying questions, right? There's not a lot to this application in general. They just want to see that you're attesting that you've made a certain amount and that you need this particular loan. So it's basically all the same questions that were in round one. And most of these are pretty easy to kind of read and understand, and just make sure that you're checking as you go through it. I'm not going to go through every single one here. But if you do have any, you want to put your initials in each one of these boxes, right? The big thing here is that we have current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing applications of the applicant. Well, guess what? Everybody's experiencing economic uncertainty right now. So that's a pretty easy call, right? You can start going through a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just have to initial by every one of them, sign, date, you're done, right? Get that to the bank and get them to process your loan for you. Then after a little while, they get back to you. But that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, it's definitely not rocket science here. If you haven't applied for the first one, apply for it. And then also apply for the second one if you qualify, right? So you might as well do both if you can. So that's it. That is the PPP round two. Not too much to explain, guys. So just go through it, get with your bank. They have all this stuff too. So all you have to do is talk to your banker, and they'll get all that stuff for you and get it taken care of for you, right? Okay. So that being said, I wanted to talk about payroll really quick here with Gusto. So, I mean, Gusto is super duper cheap, right? And Gusto's not paying me or anything like that to say anything here. Oh, well, they're trying, I guess they're trying to do an advertisement in the middle of this. So, look, Gusto is fantastic. Number one, excellent customer service. I have never had an issue with their customer service. I've always been able to get through to somebody, at least in a reasonable time period, right? So if you have any issues, if you have any issues setting up the payroll, even if you have any issues with just about anything that is payroll related, Gusto handles it. I mean, they're definitely top notch, and I don't know if anybody here has any experience with other payroll providers, but it can be a little difficult to kind of get through to them, especially if you try to use QuickBooks is awful, awful at payroll. They're like awful. They do have the enhanced payroll feature, but it puts all the onus and responsibility on you, and then they charge you more than Gusto does to do everything. Right? Gusto files everything for you. QuickBooks won't file it unless you actually click the button that says, hey, I file this, right? QuickBooks won't do that unless you actually have to know the exact process in which to do the enhanced payroll for them, right? And then all the onus and responsibility is on you to make sure that that was accurate, right? But if you go here to Gusto, they're going to file everything on time for you. Um, and it is super duper cheap. I mean, it's $25 per month for a one person deal. So if you're an S corp owner, this is the best, the absolute best process to get in and get under, right? Because that way you can run your reasonable comp. It's super cheap. That's what we try to get everybody on here, especially if they're S corp owners with reasonable comp, one person owners. That's it, right? So that's where we try to push everybody to, because it's so cheap, easy. The technology is great. It's pretty easy to get a handle on a lot of this stuff, right? And they also offer a lot more stuff with these higher packages. And you'll see there's a lot of different things that they can add to these packages, workers comp, etc. So anything that you really need, they can handle all that stuff. So pretty cool. The other thing here too, if you're just now setting, or if you're just starting to set up payroll for somebody or for your company, what you can do is you can go to there's this help center. And one of the things I suggest that everybody does, especially if they're just setting this up, is I say, new company, and then put your state in, whatever your state is. Let's do Colorado. Sometimes you have to do new Colorado. So you want to find new company registration in Colorado, right? This is one of the hardest parts about starting payroll, and that is filing for a withholding number and filing for a unemployment number. Those things are unreasonably difficult usually with most states, right? So first of all, you have to go to the Department of Revenue in order to get your withholding number, and then you have to go to the Department of Labor to get your unemployment number, because those are separate, right? I don't even know if it's a good reason, but for some reason they're separate. So you'll want to go over here and you'll see this will give you, this will most of the time tell you exactly who you need to register with, exactly why you need to register with them. Make sure that you've got all the numbers that you need in order to register with that state, right? So if you're in the city of Aurora, you have to sign in for the local taxes over there, right? If you're in Ohio, I'm sure it's going to give you a lot of different cities as well when you're trying to register. So there's a lot of really cool things here. Like they basically tell you this is how how you're taxed now that you're an employer in whatever state you're in. So it's a really cool little guidebook that kind of shows you everything in there. It's pretty interesting. I like to use this a lot. So that's it. I just wanted to talk about Gusto really quick because we love it here. And I think you'll love it too. If you have people on payroll, I think you'll really, really like it. Or if you're thinking about putting somebody on payroll, super easy to set up.